They buried her when the sun was low and the sky looked like it was on fire, as if the heavens themselves were burning with something they could not forgive. The boy stood beside the grave, too still for someone his age. His hands were clenched at his sides, fingers stiff with cold and grief. The wind tugged at his coat, thin and patched, and rattled the dry grass around the crooked wooden cross, where his mother's name had been carved in a hurry. Clara Halle, beloved mother. That was all the town could manage. He leaned against the weathered rails, hat pulled low, coat dark with travel dust. A revolver hung at his side, worn smooth by years of use. His face bore the kind of scars that did not come from accidents, and his eyes carried the weight of places most men prayed they would never see. People whispered his name when they thought he could not hear it. Outlaw. The preacher cleared his throat, spoke of mercy and eternal rest, then stepped back. One by one, the townsfolk turned away. Boots crunched on gravel. A woman dabbed her eyes. A man tipped his hat to the boy, then followed the others toward the warm glow of lanterns and supper. No one stayed. The last of the light drained from the sky. For a long moment the graveyard held its breath. Finally, the boy turned his head. His eyes found the man at the fence. It was the voice of someone who had already learned the world did not bend just because your heart was breaking. The man did not move. I wasn't planning to stay long, he said at last. His voice was rough, like it had been scraped raw by too many nights talking to no one. The boy nodded, as if that answer satisfied something inside him. He looked back at the grave. They said you knew her. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to the mound of earth. I did. From before? Yes. The boy hesitated. Were you family? The man straightened. For a moment, it looked like he might turn and walk away. When he spoke, his words were firm, almost sharp. I'm not your father. The sentence landed like a door slammed shut. The boy did not cry. He did not argue. He only nodded once, slow and careful, as though filing the words away where they could not hurt him later. I didn't ask that, he said. The man said nothing more. He turned back to the fence, resting his arms along the top rail, keeping his eyes on the grave like a sentry posted to guard something sacred. The boy lowered himself to the ground near the cross. He pulled his knees to his chest and sat there, silent. The night crept in. Red Hollow had never been much of a town. A general store, a saloon, a livery, and a church that doubled as a school when the weather allowed. It was a place people passed through more often than they stayed. Clara Halle had stayed. She arrived years ago with a baby bundled in her arms and a look in her eyes that said she had already survived things worse than this. He would speak with Clara in low voices, then leave before the sun rose high. The boy had learned not to ask about him. Now that man was here, and Clara was not. The moon climbed higher. Frost crept into the ground. The boy shivered. The man noticed. He frowned, reached into his coat, then stopped. You don't have to, he said. I know, the man replied. The boy took the coat anyway. He wrapped himself in it, breathing in the scent of leather, smoke, and distant rain. It smelled like roads and campfires. It smelled like someone who never stayed. Why are you still here? The boy asked. The man did not answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the grave, on the dark earth that covered everything he had never been brave enough to claim. Because someone should be, he said finally. A sound carried on the wind hoofbeats, distant but deliberate. The man's posture changed at once. His hand dropped closer to his gun. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the fence. The boy noticed. Fear flickered across his face. Who's that? Flickered across his face. Who's that? The man did not look at him. Trouble, he said quietly. The hoofbeats drew closer. And the outlaw did not leave his post. Hoofbeats came out of the darkness, slow and steady, like they had all the time in the world. The boy clutched the coat tighter around his shoulders. The outlaw shifted his stance, boots planting firm in the dirt. He didn't reach for his gun yet, but his hand hovered close, the way a man's does when memory tells him what's coming before his eyes can confirm it. 3 riders emerged beyond the graveyard fence, silhouettes against the moonlit plain. Their horses were lean and restless, nostrils steaming in the cold. The men sat easy in their saddles, too easy for honest travelers. Evenin', one of them called out, his voice smooth as oiled leather. Didn't expect company out here. The outlaw stepped forward, putting himself squarely between the riders and the boy. Graveyard's closed, he said. You best keep riding. The rider chuckled. Funny thing is, we were told you'd be here. The boy felt the words like a chill crawling up his spine. He looked at the man standing in front of him, at the broad back, the stillness that felt like coiled wire. Do you know them? The boy whispered. The outlaw didn't turn his head. Stay where you are. The riders exchanged glances. One spat into the dirt. Marshall's been looking for you, the leader said. Dead or alive. But mostly dead. Town's got itself a reward fund now. So I heard, the outlaw replied. Hand over the boy, another rider said suddenly, his eyes sharp. We don't want trouble. The outlaw laughed once, short and humorless. The wind stirred the dry grass around the graves, whispering over names long forgotten. The leader's smile faded. For a heartbeat, it looked like the men might listen. Then a gun cleared leather. The night shattered. One rider screamed as he pitched sideways from his saddle. Horses reared. Another shot rang out, then another, sparks flashing in the dark like... Another shot rang out, then another, sparks flashing in the dark like brief, terrible stars. The boy covered his ears, heart hammering. The boy covered his ears, heart hammering. Hammering. Go, he told the fallen man. Tell anyone else who's looking that I ain't finished here. The man didn't argue. Silence returned, heavier than before. Slowly the outlaw lowered his gun and holstered it. He turned toward the boy at last. You all right? The boy nodded, though his hands shook. You didn't have to do that, the boy said. Yes, the man replied quietly. I did. They didn't speak for a long time after that. The moon slid westward. The cold deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried, lonely and unanswered. The boy finally broke the silence. They were after you, he said. Yes. Because you're bad? The question wasn't accusatory, it was searching. The outlaw considered the grave, the boy, the long years between. I've done bad things, he said. Some of them for good reasons. Most of them because I didn't know how to stop running. The boy nodded, absorbing this the way children do without judgment, only curiosity. My mama said people ain't all one thing, he said softly. She was right, he said. The boy hesitated. Why did you never stay? The question hung between them like smoke. The outlaw closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they shone with something raw. Because I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if I stayed, I'd ruin what little good there was. Afraid you'd look at me one day and see what the rest of the world sees. The boy stared at him. I just see a man who didn't leave. The words struck deeper than any bullet. Just before dawn, lantern light appeared at the edge of the graveyard. Sheriff Cole approached, his steps cautious, his hand resting near his badge rather than his gun. I heard shots, the sheriff said. His eyes moved to the outlaw, then to the boy. Looks like you handled things. For now, the outlaw replied. The sheriff sighed. There'll be more. Town council won't protect you. And they sure won't protect him. The sheriff glanced at the boy. The outlaw felt something settle in his chest, heavy and unavoidable. Then I reckon it's time I stop running, he said. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? The outlaw looked down at the boy, still wrapped in his coat, sitting by his mother's grave. I am, he said. As the first light of dawn touched the plains. But the real question was, who would the boy belong to when the dust finally settled? The story continues in part 3. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. The sun rose slow and pale, washing the graveyard in a light that felt almost gentle. Frost glittered on the grass. The wooden cross cast a long, lonely shadow across the earth where Clara Hawley lay. The boy, he was still there, asleep sitting up, wrapped in the outlaw's heavy coat. His head rested against the fence post, his breathing steady, trusting. It's the kind of trust you only give once in your life, and never lightly. The outlaw hadn't slept a wink. He stood facing the open plains, every sense on high alert, every memory swirling in his mind. Facing the past. He'd spent his whole life running from it, leaving nothing behind but dust and unanswered questions. Now it had finally caught up. And the boy was standing right in the middle of it all. When the boy stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the outlaw crouched down in front of him. Morning, he said, his voice low. The boy just nodded. You're still here. I said I would be, the outlaw replied. They stood there together as the town slowly blinked itself awake. Smoke curled up from chimneys. A wagon creaked down the main road. Normal sounds, all of them trying to pretend the night before had never happened. The sheriff returned before noon, and this time, he wasn't alone. 2 councilmen trailed behind him, their faces tight with worry. "You can't stay," one of them said, his tone not unkind. "Not with men hunting you. You'll bring trouble down on this town." The outlaw nodded slowly. "I won't run through your streets. I'll answer for what I've done." The councilman exchanged a look. "That reward." "I know," the outlaw cut in. "But the boy stays out of it." The boy's fingers tightened on the coat. "I ain't going anywhere," he said suddenly. His voice was thin but fierce. "Not without him." The men looked startled. The sheriff studied the outlaw, his eyes sharp. "You willing to stand trial?" he asked. The outlaw met his gaze without flinching. "If that's what it takes." The sheriff gave a single, curt nod. "Then I'll see it's done proper." They took him in that afternoon. Not in chains, but he wasn't free either. The boy stood in the doorway of the jailhouse, watching as the heavy door clanged shut. For the first time since his mother's death, tears spilled down his cheeks. Just before the door closed completely, the outlaw turned back. "Hey," he said softly. The boy wiped his face with his sleeve. "You said you weren't my father." The outlaw knelt down so they were eye to eye with cold iron bars between them. "That's true," he said, "but listen to me close." He took a steadying breath. "I loved your mama. I loved her enough to know she deserved better than a man always one step from a grave. That don't mean I stopped caring. And it don't mean I won't now." The boy's lip trembled. "What if they hang you?" The outlaw managed a small, sad smile. "Then I'll have finally paid what I owe." He reached through the bars and placed his hand over the boy's. "But if I walk out of here," he continued, his voice rough with emotion, "I won't walk away again. That's a promise I should have made a long time ago." The boy just nodded, holding on as long as he could. The trial was quick. The whole town packed into the church, whispers filling the air like dust motes dancing in sunlight. Old stories came out. Tales of bloodshed and choices made in fear and anger. But then other stories surfaced. A rancher spoke of money returned when no one was looking. A widow told of food left at her door during a hard winter. And the sheriff, he spoke of a man who had stood his ground to protect a child who wasn't even his. When the verdict came, it wasn't mercy, but it wasn't death, exile. The outlaw was to leave the territory and never return. The boy stood at the back, his heart pounding in his chest. As the crowd began to disperse, the outlaw found him waiting outside, still clutching that coat. "So this is goodbye," the boy said, his voice barely a whisper. The outlaw looked toward the distant horizon, then back at the boy. "Not if you don't want it to be," he said. The boy blinked, confused. "They said you had to leave." "They didn't say you couldn't come with me," the outlaw replied. The boy's breath caught in his throat. "You'd take me?" The outlaw just nodded. "If you'll have me." The boy didn't answer with words. He just stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around the man's waist, holding on like he never planned to let go. The outlaw closed his eyes and rested his chin on the boy's head. For the very first time in his life, he didn't feel like running. They visited the grave one last time at sunset. The boy knelt and set a small bouquet of wildflowers at the base of the cross. The outlaw took off his hat. "I should have been braver," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone. "But I'll be now." The wind moved through the tall grass, gentle as a blessing. As they walked away, the boy glanced back one last time. "You really ain't my father," he said. The outlaw smiled. "No. But you stayed." "Yes," the man said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I stayed." They rode west as the sun dipped low. 2 figures against the endless plains, not bound by blood, but by something far stronger, choice. And in a land full of men who were always riding on, the outlaw became the one who finally learned how to stay. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more content just like this. We'll see you in the next one.